All right, everybody, welcome to the Nature Journal Show. Right now, I'm going to talk about the nature journaling and travel gear that I took on my recent trip to the Galapagos, what worked, what didn't, and what recommendations I have about nature journaling supplies and other travel supplies that you can apply to your nature journaling at home or if you're getting ready for a nature journaling expedition. So let's start off with my basic nature journaling kit. And I highly recommend every time you go on a trip, even if it's just a local trip nature journaling, when you get back to think about your most valuable pieces of equipment and your least valuable pieces of equipment, because there's probably things that you're carrying in your nature journaling kit that you didn't use one time on that trip. So after one of those trips, to do a reflection, and that's what I'm going to do right now with you. I've been trying to do these reflections on MVPs and LVPs every time I do a trip, like I think since I was pretty young. So I've been trying to develop an awareness of what are the things that I use the most and what I don't use. So let's start with my nature journaling bag. I've done reviews about this before. I have a whole video on how to choose the best nature journaling bag for you. And I think that it's really important to understand what some of the criteria are for choosing a bag. So for me, this bag has been the main nature journaling bag I've used for over 10 years now. I really like that it is a bag that can come around to the front, easy to access. I use this as my carry-on bag. Sometimes this is my only carry-on bag. So this was obviously one of the most valuable pieces of equipment on my whole trip. I did not really have any issues with it on this trip, except for I did have mold growing a little bit on this part here. But since I used it every day, the mold was not that big of an issue. So I'm going to go through what is inside of here to give you an idea on the kit that I carry for nature journaling. And it's slightly adapted for this trip to Galapagos, but mostly it was the same. So first off, I have this water bottle here. This is the largest metal water bottle that will fit in this external pocket. I think it's really important to have your water bottle in an external pocket. And that water bottle also was, I would say, a most valuable most valuable piece of equipment on this trip. Then now let's look inside, and we'll first look in here. What I have in this top most external pocket. One thing that I brought differently on this trip was a different pair of sunglasses. These are just cheap sunglasses that I got at REI, just regular type sunglasses. They worked pretty well. Having these was very helpful, especially nature journaling in really sunny conditions. So a cheap pair of sunglasses, polarized sunglasses, was worth it, and was a part of the gear that I carried on an everyday basis in the Galapagos. Also in this top bag are a couple other things that I think are really important. Earplugs. For me, I get really distracted by sound, especially when I'm traveling. Sleep is very important. You're in really loud places such as planes. Earplugs are super useful. If you're nature journaling in public places such as the zoo, this could also be a very helpful thing. So that is also in this outermost pocket of mine. In addition to that, and the next level up, perhaps, and you can see links to a lot of these things, especially the ones that I'm recommending, not the least valuable pieces. You can see links to them in the bottom of the video, but I'll also post them here in the chat. So the next option that I have found extremely useful, even though I did have some issues on this trip, is these noise canceling headphones. These are pretty expensive, but it is amazing on the plane. You could have these in and you won't hear the noise because they're actively blocking out a huge amount of the noise. You can listen to an audiobook or listen to music, and this can be super helpful. I've also nature journaled with these in busy places such as aquariums and zoos, and it was amazing. So these ones are the Bose noise canceling headphones. These are like the best for noise canceling that you can get in this small size. And I have taken them on multiple trips, and they've been really helpful for me, especially for when I have to do work or like video editing type things. I use them all the time. And on this trip, they were a very valuable piece of equipment. The only problem is I have had these for 2 years, so maybe that's part of it. But I did have some issues connecting these to my different devices. And I think that's partly because I use iPhone, but these can be amazing And I usually don't want to carry I think a lot hard about carry with me, but I carried these with me all of last year while I was traveling through tropical countries in South America and Central America, and they were actually a pretty useful piece of equipment. On this Galapagos trip, they were useful, especially at the beginning when there was a lot of noise near my house. However, I did have some issues partway through. That could be from the humidity. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why. Oh, I see that Nature Sketches is here. Candy's here. Hi, everybody. If you're tuning in to the live, go ahead and say something in the comments over. I think it's over here. Next thing I have in this external pocket of my nature journal kit are these sun gloves. These were also, once again, a most valuable piece of equipment, and I've taken them on lots of trips now. And even though they seem, you know, pretty lightweight, they've resisted some really tough treatment, and these are my go-to option for sun protection on my hands, because putting sunscreen on your hands, it often ends up on your watercolor paper, on your nature journal pages, in your mouth, and other places where it doesn't do what you want. It can actually really mess up your watercolors. So I much prefer using this and long sleeve shirts. I'll show you my shirt here. I love these Patagonia long sleeve shirts that have really great sun protection. These combined with these are really good. I've used them in the deserts of Baja California, Mexico, all along the Colorado River, in the Galapagos. And that combination, in my opinion, is really good for sun protection. And these are the Outdoor Research sun gloves. And I'll put the link to those here. Links are also in the description of the video down below. So that is all I have in this top most outer pocket. I don't put chocolate in that pocket because when you open up the lid of the bag, this pocket is going to be right against your body, so it will melt. So now let's go inside of here and I'll show you what I carried inside of here and what were the most valuable things for nature journaling on this trip. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, I'll talk about some of the obvious ones first. These were once again a most valuable piece of equipment. These are my Pentax Papilio close focus binoculars. If you don't know about them, I talk about them a lot, so I'm not going to go into that much detail in this video, but these are amazing. Pretty much all nature journalers should have these. I can't think of a reason why not. They are useful for looking at things up to, you can focus on things up to ½ meter of distance away from you. So you can look at flowers, you can look at bugs. You can take these to natural history museums and zoos. They're amazing. I use them all the time. They were useful once again on this trip, and I use them frequently enough that mold did not grow on them. They're really great, and they're not too expensive or too heavy. So, I mean, I carry this on the plane. So that's one thing. The other thing in here, obviously, is my sketchbook. Was obviously, this is, if I lost this, this would probably be the single thing next to my passport that would ruin the trip the most. I love this Stillman and Byrne paper. I use the 150 GSM. I'm not going to do a full page flip from the Galapagos because that's going to be for my Patreon patrons only. Here you can see some pages, though. This is the Stillman and Byrne Alpha Series 9x12 spiral bound sketchbook. So I will post the link to that, but this is the one that I always use. I've filled, I believe this is the 53rd of these that I have filled. So I love this one, and that goes here in my main kit. Next thing in this big compartment, that's a most valuable piece of equipment, as usual, is my John Muir Laws watercolor palette. So this is the palette I've been using for over 10 years. You can get it on his website. Hopefully everyone won't go and buy one all at once because they're custom made by hand, so they can run out. But this palette has 32 colors. I think he just added one. I've done lots of conversation about this before. Didn't have any issues with it this time, except for the high humidity, it can be a problem. Other than that, it's a very tough palette, very versatile in a variety of locations. So some people say, oh, it's only like West Coast California colors because John Muir Laws, that's where he works mainly. It doesn't work that great for the East Coast. Well, I've taken it all over the world, and I think that the 32 colors in here are actually quite adaptable to colors in a lot of parts of the world, from the Amazon rainforest to the East Coast to the Galapagos Islands in Tanzania and the Serengeti. So I don't think that it's just good for California and the West Coast. It's great. Mold can grow on the paints if you don't use them every day. And in high humidity conditions, some of these paints are going to start coming out. So make sure they're not super full. Like if these aren't filled to the top, that will benefit you on a trip in a highly humid place. Other thing for tips for high humid places in this palette is to leave it open like this at night. If it's open like this, the watercolors won't fall out. But as soon as it's like this, you know, some of these are upside down and the gravity pulls them down. The other thing you can do is use a blow dryer. A blow dryer is going to be your friend if you're using this palette in high humid conditions. That is all that's in this main compartment, except for one last thing that I'm going to mention. But first, let me put, I put the link to. So this is the next thing. This is something I bring as an emergency option. It doesn't take up very much space, but this right here is a 20-liter waterproof bag. So this is for like kayak trips and things like that. But what I wanted, and I used this last year as well, in the tropics, in the Amazon and Costa Rica and Panama and everything. But what the idea is here is my whole nature journal bag doesn't actually fit into here, but my sketchbook fits into here, a 9x12 sketchbook, and my watercolor palette. And if I need to, a few other things could fit into here and all be closed up like this. And I could fall in the ocean and swim to safety, and my watercolor palette and my nature journal would not get ruined. So this is a Sea to Summit bag. It's 20 liters. It's just big enough to fit in like your back pocket as an emergency. And I did have to use this multiple times on this trip because this nature journal bag is not waterproof. Most waterproof bags are not convenient for nature journaling or sketching from. So I don't recommend a bag, and I'll show you one in a second. I don't recommend a bag that's completely waterproof for your nature journaling because they're not easy to get in and out. But this I found is a great way to balance. If you get caught in a storm and all you need to do is make sure your nature journal doesn't get completely ruined on your trip, that would be terrible. You have this bag that you can pull out and quickly put your stuff into. So I'm just going to put that here in the chat. Oh, hi, James. Sandra's here too. Bugs in the gunk of paint. Not totally sure what you're asking. Hi, James. No worries. We were just talking about the basics of the supplies that I used and what was most valuable. All right, now we're going to get into some of the nitty gritty here in my nature journal kit. And obviously the water brushes were a super critical and most valuable piece of equipment. What that means also is that I brought lots of extras. I think I probably had like 6 of these with me on this trip, and having ones that are different ages, and I talked about this in my whole video about how to use water brushes, having them of different ages is important too. But I brought at least 6 of these. Not all of them in my main nature journaling kit. I still have a few of these left, my favorite pins, but they're no longer being made. I brought those and used them almost every day. I also had a Sharpie just in case. And then here are some of the other things that I had and used all the time. These are my beloved binder clips. I usually carry at least 4 of these. These you can use to clip your sketchbook open in the wind. Always very useful. And if you get the right size, there's actually, this size is just a little bit bigger and it will go all the way around the entire sketchbook. I've tried using really small ones and people have given me some cool corner ones, but they don't hold as many pages. So I like one that can almost go around my entire sketchbook. Those are super useful. And also 2 other things that were most valuable players, but they're part of my main kit. So I've talked about them before, these 2 opaque options. These are critical for waves and anything white in front of a dark background. So let me just show you a quick example. something I will show a lot more in the Patreon journal share of this. But do you see that white right there in the ocean, or the white sails on these ships? That is done by these two tools here, the Presto Jumbo Correction Pin and the Uniball Signo. And let's see, there's just a couple more things in here before I get on to some of the other travel stuff. I carry extras of these caps. You might have seen my YouTube short about this, but when your pen runs out of ink and you're going to throw it away, save the caps. I saved one from a water brush that I threw away too, because if you lose this, for example, that one I don't use all the time, but like if you lose one of these, you're going to be really sad, or you lose the cap to your pen. So I've been saving those because I've learned that having a couple extras of those is super useful. And then one last thing that I have in the main compartment of my nature journal bag is some cheap tape. I use that quite a bit on this trip, so I'm going to call it a most valuable piece of equipment, even though you can get it anywhere you travel in the world. So you don't necessarily need to bring this with you. You could probably buy this at a cheap stationery shop when you're traveling. So I've been doing these kind of things where I tape in pages that you can actually open, such as this is like a visa document for getting into Galapagos, and create some of that sort of scrapbooking or junk journaling type effect in my nature journal. This little thing of tape hardly took up any space, but it was a critical piece of equipment, and I'll call it a most valuable piece of equipment. The only other thing that I have in my main nature journal bag that I would consider a most valuable piece of equipment is this close focus clip-on lens that I've mentioned before. And this is such a useful tool. I think Akshay and Gargi were the first ones that told me about this, and I think it's like $35, but you clip this onto your smartphone and you can get the best close-up shots of insects or flowers. So I used to always get frustrated with my phone because I wouldn't be able to take close-up pictures of bugs. As soon as I get close to a bug, it loses focus. But this thing, you just clip it on here, as easy as that, and all of a sudden you can take these amazing pictures of bugs, which is great for iNaturalist, for drawing from. You can use it for flowers and stuff too. It has a wide angle lens, but I hardly ever use that because I have a wide angle lens on my phone. But if you don't, then this would be good too. Yes, I do have, I'll get into knives in a second. I think that actually is the Leatherman that I have, but I'm not sure. Okay, so that's all of the stuff in this main nature journal bag. Those were the things that I used the most. And actually, I think nothing that was in this main bag was a least valuable player or least used thing, except for perhaps 2 things of gouache. So on this trip, I added a few things that I thought I would use in my main kit, and I'll show you what those are. And these are, I'm going to put down as least valuable pieces of equipment that I did not end up using. So one was, I can't even find the other one. So I put this turquoise blue gouache because I thought that I was going to need, I might want some opaque gouache for the tropical waters of the Galapagos, which have a very unique turquoise color. And I carried around this relatively heavy, relatively expensive, and potentially messy, because these metal paint tubes can get little cracks and then the gouache can leak out. I carried this around and I didn't use it one single time. I used it yesterday now that I'm back in California, but other than that, and I think I carried around a white as well, heavy, and did not use it. So those were the main things in here that I used, and the few ones that I didn't use. Okay, next I'm going to talk about some of the extra sketchbooks that I carried with me in addition to that one. So I usually don't like having multiple sketchbooks, and I made a whole video about why you should only have one nature journal or one sketchbook. However, I have found that having a small thing like this that can fit in your pocket and you can pull out on the bus or whatever can be really useful. And I've been leaning into using these ones more for nature journaling and doing little sketches like these crabs here. So I carried this in my pocket every day in the Galapagos. And when I didn't want to pull out my larger nature journal, I would just use this. And I've gotten quite a few sketches in here. The main thing that I don't like about small sketchbooks is it messes up. If you ever look back at your sketchbooks, it messes up the organization. So if I have my entire Galapagos trip in one sketchbook, or, I have, a previous trip in this sketchbook and I have this all in one, that's great. But then if you have a little bit of your Galapagos trip in here, a little bit of your Galapagos trip in here, and suddenly you have it in all these different places, that's really annoying. What I've been experimenting with, and a lot of you have seen already, is that I cut pages out of the smaller sketchbooks and put them into my larger sketchbook so that the story can all stay chronological. So for example, these pages, this is one from that small sketchbook, and these ones are from the waterproof sketchbook. So I actually really like these small Stillman and Burns sketchbooks. I'm probably going to get some extras that I'm going to send out for some of my Patreons to test, and I will put it right here. The pocket size is 3.5 by 5.5, I believe. And the one that I'm currently using, and I sketched in it today, is the Beta series. So this has slightly heavier watercolor paper. And you can see even in the airport, I had time to do this quick sketch because it was on this pocket size Stillman and Burn sketchbook. Doing watercolor in here is a little bit harder, but it is possible. So these small sketchbooks, I filled this one completely in Galapagos, and I half filled this one in the Galapagos. So I think that these are something that was a most valuable piece of equipment for me on this trip. And I'm going to take note of that for the future. And I have a couple new ones that I purchased, and hopefully getting some free samples from Stillman and Burn to share some of those with my Patreon members. And then that's special or extra sketchbooks. The next one is the waterproof one. I'm going to talk about that in 1 second. Let me drink some mate. So this is the Write in the Rain sketchbook, and I would consider this a most valuable piece of equipment on this trip. I used it a little bit more. It had been to the Galapagos before. It's been in the ocean. It's been in the Amazon. And on this trip, after being all these crazy humid places, being in the canopy of the rainforest in Panama, after being all those places, it had mold growing on it like crazy, which is amazing because this waterproof paper, it's relatively synthetic. But I think because it had salt in it, from that time I took it into the ocean, it had salt on it, and the salt combined with the humidity in the air led to mold growing all around the outside, and it was pretty nasty, especially because it's something I tend to carry in my mouth. And it is still, I still consider it a most valuable piece of equipment. I'm going to post the link to it here, and I found that they now have it in black, which I think is super cool because this one is special. Don't just get any. Some of their sketchbooks suck for nature journaling and sketching, and sometimes it can be hard to find the correct one. But as you can see here, this one is hard bound and it has blank pages. There's other ones that I've used that are not as good. The binding's not as good and they fall apart. So this is the one that I use, and I love doing it with the Prismacolor graphite pencil. The Prismacolor graphite pencil works way better than any of the waterproof pens that I've used. And you can see what these look like right here. This is a graphite pencil. You can sharpen it with a knife in the field. It doesn't get damaged by water. You can draw underwater with it. And it's super, it gives you a lot of range in the type of line quality you get. So I highly recommend this. And what I do is this is my basic amphibious kit, is I use this huge rubber band right here. Very important. And then I put this right there, and I could go into the ocean with this, into a lake with this, into a swamp with this, into a raining rainforest with this, and keep nature journaling. So that's all you need right there, are those two things. I'll post the pencil too, because sometimes people have trouble finding that one. I see an interesting question here. I have not had, oh, that's a really interesting question. So that is an interesting question, because there is sometimes variation in the quality of the spiral binding. Some spiral brown sketchbooks have the loose end poking out. I have never experienced that with Stillman and Burns. Here you can see there's a loose end right there, and that end is sharp. It would be possible, like if this sketchbook were open like this and you put it in, I think it might be possible for this to puncture. And I had a Stillman and Burns sketchbook before where actually it's doing it right here. It's causing a little bit of damage there. I would say that's not an ideal design feature. And if this sketchbook were even better, I mean, these are really high quality sketchbooks, they would do something about that tip right there. It looks like the top one is a little bit more rounded off, but good question. I have not had it puncture the dry bag. Also, I'm not usually submerging the dry bag. I'm using the dry bag just to make sure that this doesn't get wet in like rain or situations like that. Okay, next. So that's all the sketchbooks, extra sketchbooks. Now I'm going to talk about extra art supplies. I brought a Ziploc bag with extra art supplies. And a lot of these ended up on the least valuable pieces of equipment list. So for example, I had this white pencil that I thought maybe I would use as an opaque white tool for highlights and for waves. Didn't use this one single time. So it's a great pencil. It's the Pitt Pastel Soft White pencil from Faber-Castell. It was recommended by Stera Verboken. She taught a Wild Wonder class like 3 years ago. She uses it to great effect on toned paper with black ink. I didn't use it once. I brought a couple brushes, like regular watercolor brushes. Did not use those at all. I think the watercolor brushes are just so convenient and so great that I never ended up using it. I brought a gold Uniball pen, sometimes fun, especially for like bullet journaling. I didn't use it once, not even in my bullet journal. Some white acrylic gouache. This is one that I actually carried in my main nature journal kit. Didn't use it at all. I brought a mechanical pencil. This used to be my main drawing and nature journaling tool. Didn't end up using it once. It looks like it has mold growing on it, even though I do recommend this brand if you use pencils. This Tombow pen, it's good for laying in a foundation and for doing layouts and stuff. I didn't use that once. Here is my measuring tape from John Muir Laws. Super useful, but I didn't use it once. I actually used my goniometer for all of my measurements. So this is a goniometer from John Muir Laws. I used this Tombow pen. This is supposed to be replacing my favorite brush pen. I did use these. I still don't like them as much as my original one, but I did use them. I wouldn't call it a most valuable piece of equipment. And then here's a couple weird things, and this goes to James's question. But I had been experimenting with these paint pens, you might remember, and mostly I was doing it for sort of fun, creative things such as this. But I took them to Galapagos just for fun. And one of the things that I discovered is they actually work great on the waterproof paper, not in wet conditions, but you can come back and add them later. Or like in this beach situation, nature journaling on the beach, I didn't want to have my regular kit. So I just brought this waterproof kit and I brought this paint pen, and it actually worked quite well. I don't think I got the link for that here, but this is a Posca, a Uni Posca pen. This is turquoise, and this is size PC5M. I think that's the size, or maybe that's the color. It's 1.8 to 2.5 millimeters. So I actually ended up using that quite a bit and found that it was really fun to draw with, and it was also useful. Here's this other giant one that I got in this sort of red color, and I use that as well. So I'm not going to call them most valuable pieces, but they were useful and they did get used. Couple more art supplies here that I'm going to review from this trip. I brought backups for all of my major pins. So I brought a couple backups of this one, which is still my favorite, but is no longer being produced. And then another weird thing that ended up being relatively useful, and I think I gave a bad review of this before, but this is the Tombow Mono Liquid Glue. I wanted to have one type of glue with me so I could glue in, you know, ticket stubs and do some more of that kind of junk journaling type techniques. And this glue ended up working fine for that. Here's a page where I used copious amounts of it. You can see put ticket stub in here. It even has like kind of a good smell. The applicator tip feels like a lot of thought went into it. It's not always perfect, but there's two applicator tips, a broad one and a skinny one. So if you like junk journaling or anything like that, and you like doing it in the field, this can be useful. It didn't spill even on the plane. This went up to high altitudes. Didn't have any issues with it. The glue even sort of smells good. So sometimes I would just sit around smelling it. No, just kidding. Don't do that. And yeah, so that was actually, I would consider that a most valuable piece of equipment on this particular trip. Okay, now one thing I didn't end up using, I didn't bring all of these, but I did bring some. It is archival, Mindy, that glue. It is archival, I believe. Let me double check though. I think everything that they do is archival. Let's see here. Permanent or removable bond, blah, blah, blah. For use on paper, photos, poster board, etc. Glues, dries, clear, photo safe. You know what? I'm not actually seeing it saying archival. Maybe it's not archival. All right, I'm not seeing archival on here anywhere. So guess it's not archival. So in 300 years, my sketchbook is gonna fall apart or change colors. I brought, I think, 10 things of gouache, and I thought I was gonna use some, but I didn't use these at all. So least valuable piece of equipment right there. Okay, so that covers pretty much all of the art supplies. Now I'm going to get into some of the other travel supplies that I think I was able to review and analyze how useful or not they were on this trip. But first, let me drink a little bit more of this. Oh, I did have these cheap scissors that I bought in a store in Ecuador that I had with me. And I did have these pins as well. Oops, I forgot to mention my bullet journal. So I had these pins as well. They look a lot like my favorite pin, but it's water soluble ink. One of my Patreon members, Eli, sent some of these to me because he thought these were my favorite ones, but they're not waterproof, unfortunately. But they're still good, and I mainly use them for my bullet journal. So I did bring a bullet journal on this trip, restarting a bullet journaling habit. And I found that even though it was like extra to carry, having like a daily journaling habit besides nature journaling, I think is super useful. And I would say that this carrying this bullet journal, and this is like the official one with the 3 bookmarks and all of the crazy like fancy looking stuff here. I did a whole review of it in another video. I think this was actually ended up being a most valuable piece of equipment, and the main pin that I use for this, I love having the gray option. Yeah, and that's it for art supplies. Next thing, which I should have probably started with, is like the basic stuff that I wear every day. So I'm going to show you a pair of underwear. Don't worry, they're clean. These ex officio underwear, and I'm not sponsored by any of these companies, by the way. I've used these underwear for a really long time. I don't know what they have in women's versions, but I love these underwear. I use them as my main underwear now as well. But like you could have, so what they like to say is 4 countries, 2 underwear or something. But you can have these dry so fast. They never get smelly. They're really easy to wash. You could wash them in your sink by hand and hang them out to dry next to your bed. They're amazing. So just want to throw that out there that if you're planning any trips, I highly recommend those underwear. Next is I'll show you my basic like pants and everything. I love these. I actually love pants that are synthetic, have cargo pockets, and have zip-off pants. So having zip-off pants is super useful if you're going to be in a lot of sun or if they're bugs. And having lots of pockets is like really essential for me. So I always had my basic stuff in here. I have a belt, and because I have checked luggage, I could also bring knives. So I always have a Swiss Army knife with me. If I have to go on a plane, obviously I check it in the luggage, but the one that I brought is this Swiss officer one. This is super useful. For example, if I'm doing the amphibious nature journaling, and this is my basic kit, I can use this to sharpen the pencil. This is also really useful because it has a toothpick on it. It has tweezers on it. It's really small, and I can just carry it in my pocket every single day. It's super useful, and just checked it in my luggage. This is another multi-tool that I decided to start carrying again after my trip last year. It's very useful. This one has pliers. It has scissors in it, and these scissors can be used for scrapbooking. I've used them quite a bit last year. They were my main pair of scissors. If you get a flesh wound, they can be useful as well. Small scissors that were very useful. And this overall was a useful thing to have, even though it means I have to check my luggage. That's all that I have there. Then I also always have a extra plastic bag. I brought lots of plastic bags with me. I think this is the pint size. This is really useful if you get caught in a rainstorm. All you have to do is put your or you have to go on a ferry where you don't know you could. When you get off on the beach, you might get wet. When you're getting off on the beach, you just drop your phone in here real quick, zip it up. Obviously, you have to make sure these are well zipped and don't have holes in them. But like in a rainstorm, that's definitely going to protect you. You can still even use your phone while it's in here. And I definitely did this on multiple trips working with the kids where we were hiking in rainy places. I had this Ziploc bag always in my pocket, and I carry extras. Super useful thing to have in one of your pockets at all times, especially when traveling in the tropics. Always have a handkerchief, multi-purpose. And those are the basic things that I had with me at all times in these pants. I don't really like everything about this brand, but there it is. A couple other things on clothing that I'm going to mention. I didn't use this as much as I usually do, but I love buffs. This can be used for sun protection. This one is the synthetic one. But like when I was nature journaling in the Grand Canyon and in the desert, I use this every day. So instead of putting sunscreen on and ending up with sunscreen on your paper, you can use this. You can cover your face. It's also good for sleeping on planes. These kind of things are great for sleeping on planes. You just go like this and cover your eyes. Great for sleeping on planes, for covering up your hair. You can do all kinds of things with them, and combined with a hat, you can protect your entire upper body from sun. And the hat that I used, and this was a most valuable player on this trip, is this Shelta hat. They actually gave me this one for free. The last one I had, I used it a lot. I used it on the Grand Canyon. This hat is one of the only hats that I know of that can provide a lot of sun protection, but also not get blown off in the wind. It can handle so much wind, and it has this stiff, no flop thing. So for me, nature journaling, this helps my eyes so much and helps protect me from the sun, and makes it so I don't have to put sunscreen all over my hands and get that on my pages, because that is a big problem. So these two things combined with those sun gloves and a long sleeve shirt, like these ones from Patagonia that I use, they're the best for sun protection, and that's going to help you so much. The one last thing I'll mention for sun protection, because some people don't know about these, I thought they were kind of dorky at first, but basically it's like a hooded sweater, but instead of being for warm weather, this is actually for hot weather. People use them in the ocean a lot, but this one particular one's by Patagonia, but there's several brands now. It's basically like a hooded sweater that, and people call these hoodies. It's like a hoodie for the sun, and because it has the hood, it's a really convenient way to once again protect your upper body from the sun. This is really good if you're actually getting into the water. So I use this quite a bit, that I would call it a most valuable player. This will protect you so much, and combined with a hat, you have a really good option for protecting yourself from the sun while nature journaling on a beach or tropical island. You might not be on the runway in Paris for the fashion, but you're going to be a lot more happy than your friends who are getting sunburned. I also use these as a pajamas sometimes, so that was worth carrying. Let's see. All right, so now I'm going to get into the bags that I took and a couple other things that were least valuable pieces of equipment. This is the medicine bag that I use. I really like it, and this one is called, it's called Sea to Summit. It's their small version of their toiletry bag. I actually use this for the last year and a half because I'm nomadic. I basically use this for my toiletry, all of my toiletries all the time. You can open it up and it hangs from a hook. It has a cool way that you can hang a mirror right here. I think I lost the mirror. It has a good level of organization, but it's small enough that I can fit it into my main little backpack and access it very easily and use it wherever I'm staying. This is my toiletry bag. Really like that one. One other thing sort of in the toiletry and medicine department that I'm going to mention. I've talked a lot of poo-poo about sunscreen so far, but if you are going to use sunscreen and don't want to get it on your nature journal pages, use one of these sticks. So it's basically like a chapstick, but it has the I almost said watercolor. It has the sunscreen in it, and that means you can apply it without getting it on your hands. Super easy, super convenient. They can melt just like chapsticks, so you have to be careful of that. But this way you can put sunscreen on without getting it on your fingers and on your nature journal pages. So that's one pro tip that I want to give. And then another one that I like is psyllium. So psyllium is a fiber supplement. When you're traveling, taking good poops is going to make your day a lot better. So just having these, it's a way more convenient way to take fiber than spoonfuls of the powder. So super convenient. The only problem is you need to take a lot of these, so it'd be hard to carry enough for a long trip, but something I highly recommend. I'm not going to get into the details of my toiletry kit. I'm going to mention two other things about like technology stuff. Most valuable pieces of equipment, my headlamp. I think I've reviewed this before. A headlamp or some type of flashlight that's not your phone is really important. Having a small backup battery that you can charge your phone from is really useful, but I didn't use it at all on this trip. So this ended up being a least valuable player. It's pretty heavy, but it was not, I didn't end up using it on this trip, even though it has been helpful in the past. One other thing that ended up not working as well as I wanted it to is this mini little printer. I mentioned this before and showed how to nature journal with it, and I only managed to use it a couple times. My plan was to use it mostly for getting more people on my pages, and I'll show you one that I did, but I kept having issues with it not printing. So here you can see a little collage with photos of some of the kids that I worked with, and I stuck that in because I thought I was going to be able to do that a lot. And however, the printer, I don't know if it was the conditions, the humidity, or what, and I still have packs of photo paper that I haven't used. So I'm going to experiment with it more, but this ended up being a least valuable player. I can't remember how expensive it was, but this is a lot to carry on a trip like that and not end up using it. I'm still optimistic about the possibilities of using these small printers with nature journaling, and I'm going to be investigating that more in the future. How can we combine something like this to insert photos into our nature journal pages while in the field? I think there's potential, but on this trip, it didn't get used. It didn't perform well enough under the conditions I was in. So I'm going to consider it a least valuable piece of equipment. All right, that's all for those things. Another least valuable piece of equipment is bags. So here is a waterproof dry bag. This is the one that I took on the Grand Canyon trip. My entire nature journal kit fits inside of here, and for it to actually be dry, you have to do this whole process of closing this zipper, this rubber zipper, very carefully, and using an extreme amount of finger strength. So prepare for your hands to get totally tired. Then you have to twist it at least 3 times and then clip these 2 ends. Wait, that's not right. Oh yeah, clip these ends down here. And once you do that, this could go through a waterfall and stay dry. However, it's so hard to get things in and out of here that it's really hard to nature journal from because of all of that friction. I ended up not using this at all, and this is a big, bulky, special piece of equipment to bring on a trip and not use at all. So when you encounter one of those LVPs after a trip, it's your chance to reflect on like what went wrong, why didn't I use it, how can I change this, should I just eliminate this from my next trip? So one of the things I'm trying to teach you in this video is that when you go nature journaling in your own park or backyard or somewhere, you can do this sort of revision process and you can refine your kit instead of just carrying a bunch of stuff that you don't use and forgetting the stuff that you use the most. Because maybe you went on a trip to another country, a year goes by, you're getting ready to go on another trip, and you can't remember what were those critical things that were the most valuable. This was the small backpack that I used. I would consider it a most valuable player, even though I have certain issues about the design of this. One thing that I'm going to show you that I ended up using it for a lot on this trip, which I wasn't expecting, is I used this as a way to make my nature journal kit easier to carry. And this is something I'm going to delve into more in the future. I think it's really important for nature journaling, but having this sort of flexibility with your carrying tools, with your bags and backpacks, like this is great. I've gone on long hikes with this, with the Hadzabe in Tanzania, the Hadzabe Bushmen, following them on like super long, grueling hikes. It is possible to hike with this, but one cool thing is to be able to have a backpack where you can just insert your whole nature journal kit inside of there. It's more protected. This looks waterproof even though it's not. Your nature journal stuff is more protected, and because it's a backpack, you carry the load better. You can also carry more water. Then you travel with this. Obviously, it's not easy to access a nature journal. This is for destination nature journaling. I'm hiking a long distance or I'm traveling to a location. Then I can pull this out and pull out my nature journal kit and nature journal when I get there. That's one of the main ways that I used this backpack. It's also just my carry-on where I carry my computer and all my video editing stuff. So that was a most valuable player. And then the final piece, I think I'm at the final piece now. Hopefully I haven't forgotten anything. The final thing that I'm going to mention, and this is super important, and this is something I've been using for years, and I'm even using it right now, is this chair. This is the travel chair by Joey chair. This chair is amazing. I use this as my main office chair, my main sitting chair, and I've been using it that way for over a year. It's been down the Grand Canyon through every single rapid on the Grand Canyon. I'm probably going to need to get a new one at some point, but right now it has one hole from a piece of a burning ember landing on it from a campfire. But this thing is amazing. It didn't get any mold growing on it, probably because I used it every day on this trip. but this chair is so good. It's the best for doing like landscape paintings. You can sit on the beach, you can sit on lava rocks, you can sit on any surface. I use it in all of my hotel rooms or anywhere that I'm staying, where I'm staying right now, and I'm probably gonna be using it as my main chair for the next 2 months that I'm in California. This chair is amazing. It folds up. It's not super small. Like I have a smaller stool. This stool is smaller. It's about the size of a credit card. And this one is bigger, but it's also way more comfortable. I could sit in this chair all day long. That's my final piece. Also, like, which are the clothes that you end up wearing every day? Be aware of what are those things that you used every single day? What are those things that you never pulled out of your backpack and didn't use at all? If you can, after a trip, try to do this. Make a list. MVPs, LVPs, and then put it somewhere where hopefully you'll see it before your next trip. Even just going through the process of thinking about, oh, this is an MVP. Oh, this is an LVP. That's going to help you so much for your next trip. I highly recommend it. And for everyone who's going on my Costa Rica trip, this video is going to be assigned watching. I'm going to give a shout out right now to my Patreon. These are the people that have supported me and this Nature Journal show for the last year. It's been really awesome, and I'm really excited to be tweaking some things with the Patreon coming soon. So if you've been watching the Nature Journal show for a while and don't know about the Patreon, definitely check it out. Things are probably going to be shuffling around a little bit in the next few months as I try to figure out how to make a little bit closer to a living from doing this more than full-time job. So the Patreon is a cool place to learn about the community and to support the show with just $5 a month. And I'm going to be creating a lot more exclusive content for the Patreon. So if you start seeing fewer videos on YouTube, it's because I'm going to be putting more attention into creating content for the Patreon community, who are the ones that are supporting the show. Because right now, you know, I think I get like less than $10 a month from YouTube for the thousands and thousands of watches that I get, the views that I get. And anyways, so if you notice anything changing on the channel, it's probably related to the Patreon. There will be more announcements about that soon. Thanks to Sandra. I'm actually going to be doing an interview with Sandra coming up soon on my Instagram. And Mindy, that's really cool that you're sitting on a similar chair at a campsite watching this right now. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, that's kind of like what I'm talking about right now. That's so cool that you do that, Mindy. All right, everybody, thanks for joining in. Thank you, James, Sandra, Mindy, and everybody else watching this live. See you next Wednesday. Bye.